Good evening. Let me call to order the regular City Council meeting for the City of St. Helena for May 18th, 2018. Would Mr. White lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Galbraith?
Here.
Vice Mayor White?
Here.
Councilmember Doring?
Here.
Ellsworth?
Here.
Coberstein? Here.
The next item on our agenda is public forum. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address us with respect to matters not on our agenda tonight, and public forum this evening at least is limited to 3 minutes. Does anybody wish to speak at public forum? Seeing none, our next item is reports by staff, City Council, future agenda items, and AB 1234 reports. Let me begin with the City Attorney. We met in closed session, and he can advise as to whether we had any reportable action or not.
The City Council did meet this afternoon in closed session, discussed all of the 5 items designated on today's agenda for that meeting. No reportable actions were taken.
All right. Mr. Prestwich?
Just a brief report that the SHAPE Committee is anticipating concluding their work tomorrow night, 6:30 in this room. They'll be reviewing a draft report. That report is anticipated to be shared with the City Council at the June 12th Council meeting.
Excellent. Ms. Mitz?
Thank you. Just wanted to let everybody know that on May 9th, we did hold our budget study session where we presented our draft budget to City Council as well as members of the public. We received feedback from City Council on the direction to go for the final budget, and we are planning on bringing that forward for adoption on June 12th.
All right. Ms. Stefopoulos? Nothing, even when I get the name close to right? Good job. All right. Mr. Hausch?
Just briefly, the general plan EIR is progressing. I had a conference call with the consultants. They completed their traffic counts and are starting to begin some of the technical work, and staff will anticipate presenting an update to the schedule probably at one of the meetings in June.
All right. Ms. Smithies?
Yes, I wanted to report that we're having bid openings this Thursday for the Kennedy Court, El Benito Way, and La Quinta railroad overlay, and then we will have the bid opening for the railroad curb ramp upgrades as well as the ADA transition plan upgrades first year, which includes Library Lane, Adam Street, and Grayson curb ramps. And in addition, we received our no comments on our draft feasibility study to the water boards for the wastewater treatment plant upgrades. That includes the groundwater study, so our recommendations and results from the groundwater studies and our finalized feasibility study will include the master plan improvements for our final engineering design for the wastewater treatment plant upgrade project. So I just want to give you a quick update on those.
That's a good thing, right?
Yes.
And
no comments from the state's great. So.
And does that come back before us at some point?
Yes.
And do you have an indication as to when?
Not probably in the foreseeable future, probably this summer at some point. I'm getting a nod from our utility operations manager in the back. And it's also Public Works Week. And
we're going to get there in just a minute.
Thank you for that.
All right. Ms. Coberstein? Mr. Ellsworth?
Nothing.
Mr. Doring?
Nothing, thank you.
What? My goodness. I have just one quick thing. Mr. Doring and I attended what is called a Monrovia meeting. It's a quarterly meeting at the high school in the superintendent's office, although it doesn't necessarily have to be there. It brings together different stakeholders in the city for a discussion. But what caught my attention was a handout that dealt with the St. Helena teen programs. They were discussed a little bit in our last budget session, but it's the numbers that caught my attention, and particularly this sentence. Now, the teen program has a room that's a dedicated room to it in the elementary school, but it's operated by the Boys and Girls Club. The average attendance for the month of April was 54. Our highest attendance was 60, and the lowest was 50. So this is a new program under the direction of the Boys and Girls Club, and it is attracting a very large number of teens And I think that underscores the council's wisdom, if I can put it that way, in upping the contribution by the city to the Boys and Girls Club. So I wanted to bring that statistic to everybody's attention. It's impressive.
Recognizing our wisdom is always a good thing to report.
I knew. Okay. That takes us to proclamations, and we have one. Where's your camera, Jesse?
Jesse looks like
Jesse, did you start working for Public Works?
It's an impressive group. All right, we'll get together for a group picture after I read the proclamation. But the proclamation is for National Public Works Week. Whereas public works services provided in our community are an integral part of our citizens' everyday lives, and whereas the support of an understanding and informed citizenry is vital to the efficient operation of public works systems and programs such as water, storm drains, sewer, streets, and highways, public buildings, and solid waste collection, and whereas the health, safety, and comfort of this community greatly depends on these facilities and services, and whereas the quality and effectiveness of these facilities, as well as their planning, design, and construction, are vitally dependent upon the efforts and skill of public works crews, and whereas the efficiency of the qualified and dedicated personnel who staff public works departments is materially influenced by the people's attitude and understanding of the importance of the work they perform, and whereas the year 2018 marks the 58th Annual National Public Works Week sponsored by the American Public Works Association, and now therefore be it resolved that the St. Helena City Council, city staff, and the citizens of St. Helena do hereby proclaim the week of May 20-26, 2018 as National Public Works Week, and encourage all citizens to join us in this observance dated May 22, 2018. And I did, when I read it, added storm drains.
Took some incentive to keep some of these folks past 3:30 this evening, but we're about half our teams here, and it's really, as I said, I think a year ago, that it's an honor and privilege to work with this team. They are hard workers and dedicated to the city, citizens, and the council of this fair city. And I'd like to introduce Chrissy Cook. She is our admin assistant and front lines for all the phone calls to the main office, as well as encroachment permits, every other question, grading permit applications, and anything else that comes up during the week. We have Dan Brunetti, I think our oldest, long-serving staff member on our team. It's his knowledge is important to the city, and hope he continues along with us for a little bit longer here. And Darren Gardette, one of our newer hires, and has been a great asset to our team on the streets, storm drains, and parks. And I have Eric Kinney, who's also been here for quite a few number of years, and some great asset to our crews on the city courtyard teams. And then you have Glenn Price, our public works superintendent, and also, all-around jack of trades gentleman there. And I have Carlos Uribe, public works maintenance manager, who oversees the streets, crews, parks, our certified tree arborist, and storm drain, and everything else belonging to the courtyard crews. We have Lou Loxton with our wastewater treatment plant. I forgot to mention that Dan Brunetti is our chief operations manager for the water Louis Lestrada water treatment plant, and our Bell Canyon Reservoir, and our Giant Brita activated carbonated that helped address the taste and odor issues this last fall. And we have AJ Killingsworth, which is part of our parks, streets, and sewer, our storm collection and storm sewer collections. team. And then we have Felix Hernandez, our utility operations manager. They are all a fantastic team. They work well together. And when push comes to shove, like in the recent fires, this team is here to help the city. So it was a privilege to work with them this last fall.
So, why don't you gather in front and let Jesse take your picture.
Ready, Dennis?
Let's get over here. And we'll get out of that. Yes. Oh, go ahead. I hear you. We're all going to be buying cheesecakes.
Let's shake hands. Kissing babies.
Thank you very much.
We still have a fancy camera.
Thank you very much. There you go. Yeah, good. Thanks very much for coming. Appreciate it. All right. The next item on our agenda is consent items. And given our new practice, I would ask, let me ask whether any member of the council or public wishes any item to be removed from the consent calendar.
Yeah, I'd like to pull 8.7.
8.7.
8.5.
8.5. All right. Then the chair would accept a motion to accept the consent calendar items 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, 8.4, and 8.6.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Councilmember Doring?
Yes.
Vice Mayor White?
Yes.
Councilmember Ellsworth?
Yes.
Coberstein?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes. And that takes us back to 8.5,
I don't need a report. I just wanted to make a comment, and I made this comment earlier to the city manager. In other words, I don't need a report on this. I just wanted to inquire and hope that we will have, if we don't already have, a policy with respect to how we use body-worn cameras. The policy, I mean, most cities have policies with respect to body-worn cameras, and I don't know if we have one, but we should have one before we roll those out. With respect to data collection, activation, deactivation, public dissemination of the stored material, where it's stored, there's all kinds of interesting issues that come up, frankly, from a legal perspective, but from a good practices perspective. So I think that would be important to have something like that brought back to the council. There are a lot of good policies out there. I know the city of Sacramento has a very good policy that they've recently updated because of some issues there. So just want to make that comment.
would you like two council members to work with you on that, Mr. Prestwich?
If it's helpful, it may be helpful tonight to just have the police chief touch on policies related to this.
All right, let's hear from him, and obviously we can't select two people tonight because I know from past experience that it would violate the Brown Act, but let's hear from the police chief.
Admittedly, the chief was out for a few minutes, so I'm not sure he caught all that was going on. And I don't.
So on the item 8.5, question about policies related to the equipment.
I had a follow-up, another question, too, after this, on this.
Sure.
Sorry about that. I was talking to the school district superintendent in the hallway.
So it's unrelated to the purchase. I was just wanting to know whether we have a policy. If we don't, whether we will develop one before we roll out the use of these cameras. That was
Yes, sir. So we do have a policy in place. We have had for probably 10 years or more had a policy in place. It gets modified occasionally as needed, as either recommended by Lexipol or through case law or whatnot. And the current policy is from October of 2017 was the last update. But it's been in place. We've been following it. It has mostly to do with our mobile audio recorders, which we all carry in our pockets, but the policy relates directly to video and audio. We just haven't had the video, personal video, to have to deal with it yet, but the policy is in place.
Yeah, my suggestion there is that the policy be circulated to members of the city council so we can take a look at it, and then if a couple of us get back to the city manager and say that we think it's worthy of a council discussion dealing just with cameras, that we move forward that way and with some alacrity. But I do agree with Councilmember Doring that a council should focus on that specific policy issue and make sure it's happy with it. Okay. Mr. Ellsworth?
Yeah, the comment or question I have is, and I was thinking there was going to be another budget meeting tomorrow where this could be brought up, but since we're not doing that, I have another sort of camera-related question in terms of there's been a number of folks in the community interested in some sort of mobile camera units that can be set up for traffic issues, that sort of thing. And there's been some community, willingness to match funds with the city if the city comes up with a program that might work. And so is that, how might we move forward with that aspect? If it's not a body-worn camera, but it's a unit that can be placed at certain areas.
Now, let me ask Mr. Brown, is that discussion beyond the scope of 8.5?
I think it is. I think it probably can be on our agenda at a future meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I'll do is, if I can get some support to agendize that at a future meeting, and then we can discuss how to perhaps...
Yeah, my general policy is if a city council person wants something to go on a future agenda, I will support it, so don't worry about that.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The chair would accept a motion at this time to approve item 8.5.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Doring?
Yes.
Vice Mayor White?
Yes.
Councilmember Ellsworth?
Yes.
Coberstein?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
That takes us to 8.7.
Okay,
And with respect to A, I have a personal financial interest, as I explained last time, so if the discussion is with respect to 8.7A, I need to leave the room.
okay. I just wanted to...
Is it? I mean, is it?
Is it?
Well, I just wanted to separate the two so I could vote on each one individually. So we could vote on
That's fine.
RM3 first. And then,
I've got no problem. Let's vote on RM3 first, and then we'll see whether I have to leave the room on
Okay.
8.7A. I think we discussed this at our last meeting. I don't think there's any further discussion. Is there?
I move to approve.
Is there any further public comment? No. There's a motion, a second. Roll call, please, on 8.7B.
Vice Mayor White?
Yes.
Councilmember Doring?
I didn't second it, but yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought there was... Who seconded?
I seconded it.
Oh,
That's all right. Yes.
Ellsworth?
Yes.
Coberstein? Yes. Mayor Galbraith?
Yes, and that takes us back to 8.7A. If there's any discussion with respect to that, I need to leave the room.
No discussion. I just want to vote separately on it.
All right. I don't think I need to leave the room if I'm simply abstaining, correct?
Right.
Well, if
It's a consent item, it is now too.
Microphone.
you don't need to leave the room if it is still on the consent agenda. And so I would construe that the only thing that was pulled from the consent agenda was the question of how to vote on this. And so it would be appropriate, I think, for the full council to vote on subpart A. You don't have to leave. You simply note your recusal on that item.
Okay, very good.
If it's deemed to remain on the consent agenda, which we are deeming it.
Okay. So is there a motion to approve the resolution for Measure D?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, and I'm noting that I'm abstaining for financial reasons.
Councilmember Ellsworth?
Yes.
Coberstein?
Yes.
Doring?
Yes.
White?
No.
Mayor Galbraith?
Abstaining for personal financial interest.
Again?
All right. That takes us to new business, and it's the Chamber of Commerce Annual Report and Fiscal Year 2018-19 Budget. Let's see here. I think we start with the City Manager, and then we'll hear from the Chamber.
Good evening. Each year, the Chamber of Commerce has a responsibility to provide an annual report to the City Council. And this evening, we have representatives of the Chamber, or at least one and at the moment, maybe two soon, a couple, to provide that report.
All right. Okay, good.
Well, good evening, City Council. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Joaquin Razo, and I'm the Vice President and Chief Strategy Officer for the Chamber. I'd like to begin with a written statement from the Chamber CEO and President Amy Caraba, who couldn't be here this evening due to health treatment logistics. First and foremost, we want to thank the City and the City Council for the support and generosity towards the Chamber. You might not hear this enough, but let me be loud and clear. We are extremely grateful for the generous amount of funds that you allocate to the Chamber every year to help destination marketing. We understand you have many choices, but rest assured that you can't go wrong with the Chamber. As the new CEO, Amy has made it her mission to make big changes that will benefit our members, positively impact our charming town, and have a more synergetic partnership with the city. Within the first 6 months, we have been able to relocate the Chamber office into the stronger pulse of Main Street in order to better engage our community. This move has been vital for the Chamber to be in the heart of all the action. Moreover, we are now able to provide restrooms to the public as an added amenity to the city. We have also started community walks with the city manager and the police chief and other caring city leaders that find extra time to put the framework of engagement into practice. Moving forward for the 18-19 fiscal year, the Chamber has big plans that include more community events, social media workshops, digital marketing tactics to vitalize our businesses on Main Street, and social media campaign to market the city of St. Helena, and so much more. We truly believe our community is stronger because of the programs put in place by the Chamber. However, most, or debatably all of our success derives from our City and City Council support via the destination marketing budget that helps us stay the course to make sure that the mission and the vision of the Chamber are being met. We exist to maintain the quality of life in St. Helena, and we are truly grateful for your continued support. So when we go through this presentation, I'm going to go over a few of the things that we've done over this year, report out how our efforts have been, and share that with everybody. So, of course, for the Chamber, our mission is a membership-based association to promote, organize, and enhance the local economy of St. Helena and direct and indirect benefit of its members in the community. We do this by business-targeted consumers to build revenue with low impact, advocate for issues central to our mission success, and engage the community to strengthen its support of the St. Helena businesses. We are about 265 members strong. 96% of those members are in St. Helena. Patrons can always find a list of members on the Chamber website and learn how to support all our local businesses. Here's a list of our board of directors who work and engage with the Chamber on a daily basis and who are very supportive of this town and our community. Some of what we focus on in terms of destination marketing is really to market St. Helena to build revenue with low impact, heads to beds in the off season, bucks and tills, forks in hands, and really position St. Helena as a world-class destination, educate consumers on options, increase technology communication, and focus on lifestyle, passion, and experience of what we have to offer. We have transitioned, as I just mentioned, our Welcome Center to the heart of Main Street. We moved from 657 to 1320A. Over 13,000 visitors were served, and then over about 11,000 maps distributed. And I want to be very clear, those maps are not just of all the wineries, but also downtown Main Street, restaurants, shops, everything that they can really engage in. Since Amy and I started in November, we made it a mission to make sure that the Chamber and the Welcome Center is open 7 days a week, 9 to 5 during the week, 10 to 2 during the weekends, but also expanding those hours once we hit June. Public restrooms are available in those new offices, and our visitors have increased since moving to the heart of Main Street. On average, since last July, we were about 650, 675, and just in April, we hit 820, and we're on track to exceed that in this May as well. We had some press from the local newspaper about moving and preparing to move, and we've had a lot of local visitors excited to see us there, and they're all visiting. We have folks just coming in to sit down and kind of enjoying this space, which is really fun to see. And it really gives us an opportunity to meet the locals, to understand, and to engage with the community. Our Welcome Center staff, we have 4 full-time employees. We do have contractors as well that help with managing social media, our website, analytics, public relations. So we have Amy as the CEO, myself as Vice President that oversees our membership and kind of all our strategy pieces. We are implementing a new piece to help manage the Welcome Center and kind of just the communication with members, as well as our events manager and concierge who helps all the events and anything that we do strategically with the city, and then also our bookkeeper. And when we started in November and really tried to hone in on what we were doing is really to tell the story of St. Helena, and that's what we do with destination marketing, to honor St. Helena and to tell that story. Amy's first day was actually the day the fire started. And one of the tactics after the fires was really, how do we let people know that we're ready, that we're here, that this hasn't torn us down? So one of the first pieces was to bring in that digital marketing aspect, and a digital video for social media outlets was created. And I'm just going to play that here real quick.
With love and strength, we fought for the beauty of our landscape, and it shows. Our hearts and hospitality are stronger than ever. Some businesses have been here for generations. Our wineries put a lot of love into their harvest, ready to pour you a glass of wine. And trust us, the heart wants what the heart wants. And heart is where St. Helena is. So come and see us. Spread the love and the word. Napa Valley's Main Street is open for business.
And with this, we really focused in on a hashtag #MySt.Helena, and that's something that we will carry out through all our campaigns, and really to honor that everybody has a story of St. Helena, whether a tourist or a local. This view alone, in terms of digital marketing, had 27,000 views just in the first week, and in the first 2 weeks had over 456,000 views. This is a prime example of how we're going to make strides in telling and sharing the St. Helena story digitally and through social media. I think we're in a great position to have Amy as the Chamber CEO because of her strong background in social media and digital marketing as well to help get results such as this. Went back too many. So sthelena.com, our website. For the fiscal year to date, the website visitation is up 20%. just over 97,000 sessions, and on average 9,700 visitors a month. April's visitation was up 10% over last year's April as well. We have a 26% booking rate for hotels through sthelena.com. Monthly calendar promoting all our members, our local events, and we have 36 blog featuring local businesses and community events that we do throughout the year as well. Media coverage, in terms of one thing that we try to do that St. Helena really hadn't done before was called a social media meetup. We had a local social media guru, superstar, start at Gott's Roadhouse. She promoted Gott's, but then also they walked down as a group, kind of explored downtown St. Helena into the shops as well. These were some of kind of the clips. You have Acres there, you have Gott's, some of the presentation, walking into the vintage home. And this was just really strong engagement and high-profile engagement for her followers. She has, I believe, over 700,000 impressionable followers on just her sites alone. This was from the brand manager at Gott's Roadside. Should say they relayed to the council that it brought a great group of people who were enthusiastic about food and wine to the town and created a lot of excitement and buzz. Terry, who is the social media person, her boomerang video got an incredible number of views and received a lot of comments, all things that are nothing but positive as far as destination marketing goes. She loved it, and she loved that it was something different and outside of the box. I'm going to go through some of just the media coverage that we got for St. Helena throughout the year. This article was great. We were kind of one of those 10 most picturesque tiny towns in Northern California. This was a great article, and we got some great feedback and even visitors coming in saying, we want to see this town. A lot of food blogs 72 hours of food in St. Helena, so that, time frame of breakfast, lunch, dinner, it's a long time and a lot of food, but it was a great article. So this was some of the international, national media coverage for magazine media features we had. So Bay Area Buzz, Travelgram, Sunset Magazine, Travel and Leisure, Luxury World Traveler, Food and Wine. These are just some great outlets that are really helping to promote our town. So in terms of media coverage also, we had just in 36 pieces alone, we had impressions on 67 million subscribers to those, and 281,000 in terms of coverage views, as well as 37,000 coverage social media hits. And those numbers are still rising as we're this is just to date, and we go through June for these as well. So these are some of the different local kind of Northern California traction that we got, and some of the view statistics you can see on the side in terms of how many hits they got and how many subscribers those areas have. And mostly for all of these, they combined, it was over 10 million that were kind of impressed upon whether they have more subscribers. But in terms of how these articles affected their thoughts of St. Helena, it was about 10 million. And then some, great articles on just day trips from San Francisco. Of course, that's where we do get a lot of visitors from the Bay Area. And then also acknowledging us as one of the 30 most exciting food cities in 2017. And in terms of general social media coverage, St. Helena's Facebook page was up 21%, Instagram is up 31%, Twitter is up 14%, Pinterest is up 18%. A lot of destination marketing is actually being funneled through Pinterest, which I'm learning through Amy as well. Social media continues to be key in growing our audience and really telling that St. Helena story. Our Little Book of Big Experience, we sold more than 750 little books this year. 16 bloggers came to town. Those bloggers had combined over 1 million followers. So they would come in, talk about Little Book, talk about the hotel that they're staying in, share that the restaurants, the wineries that they're exploring, downtown as they walk around, and all of, sharing with their reach. And with views, it was over 2.4 million views. We had a lot of partnerships with tourists, digital ads, public relations, and then social media advertising. With Little Book, we got some great articles in terms of 24 reasons why to visit St. Helena. One strong support that we got this year was really partnering with hotels. And hotels really were able to, if it's 2 nights stay, you get a free Little Book. So someone staying in the hotel, they would get a Little Book and really be able to experience St. Helena in particular. And some hotels had such tremendous success with this, especially Down, Wine Country Inn, and a few others that it just blew out of the park. And we were able to partner with them, sell them to the hotels wholesale, and really be able to provide them the opportunity to provide a package for their visitors and for our town's guests. Here's some of the clips from the different social media bloggers. We have Los Alcabos there, and then kind of just enjoying that St. Helena. And then also we had one social media influencer kind of be highlighted in particular for never wanting to leave St. Helena. She enjoyed her town, this town so much, and really left that impression on her followers. So going into a little bit about the Chamber's budget. So for the revenue for this year, we have membership dues, our programs, our city council, our TID funding, and then also the funding we receive from Visit Napa Valley. In terms of our expenses, we do spend a large portion of our budget on destination marketing, on our members, providing programs for our members, as well as our administration costs for the Chamber in particular. I don't know why it keeps doing that. Yeah. So in terms of just focusing on our budget and focusing on destination marketing alone, we do have the city contract, we have the TID, we have Visit Napa Valley, and then also the Chamber's resources that we pull in for destination marketing. And we spend about $359 so far this year, or projected, I would say. And then in terms of the expenses, it keeps I might just use the computer. So this is, if we break it up in terms of our expenses, a lot of our brand positioning, digital advertising, our website, our campaign for Little Book, our social media campaigns, our PR and media, some of the costs of the Welcome Center, our administration costs, and then also our community events that's part of the contract. So we really try to make sure that we're zero balancing out in terms of how we spend and that we're maximizing what we spend to the best of our ability. Our community events in terms of how we allocated those funds in particular, Earth Day, Harvest Festival, fireworks, the holidays. We included an extra event in terms of doing the promotion for the city after the fires. Celebrate St. Helena, summer concert series, and then also the sidewalk sales. So to start to wrap up all of this, it's really the idea of when we promote these community events, when we promote what we're doing with digital advertising, digital marketing, destination marketing, it's really the idea to share the pride that we all have for St. Helena, to share that story and celebrate what we do. And we're going to finish before we hear from some of our board members, just with the video that was produced for Celebrate St. Helena to really honor how we celebrate, what we celebrate, and why we do what we do. So as we move forward, that's the type of focus that we're going to be doing in terms of digital marketing, and really what social media is those really short 30-second clips of really how to share the town, how to share our events, how to share our story. So,
Hi, good evening. So my name is Casey Garrett, and I am on the board of directors for the Chamber of Commerce and work at Coldwell Banker. And I'm just here just to say thank you. And thank you for hearing our presentation tonight. And you might ask, what does this mean? It means really that the Chamber is a leader in our community for businesses, and our members will continue to strengthen and transform St. Helena. We have great momentum now, and we look forward to the future. Our 2018-2019 fiscal year is a vital year for the growth of St. Helena Chamber of Commerce, and we really can't do that without the city's support. We really appreciate all that you do, and we really thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further comment from Chamber board members or others?
Jesse?
Yeah, well, just a minute. We'll hear from the Chamber, and then I'll open it up public comment. Or further public comment.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Marcel Adderley. I'm the chairperson of the St. Helena Tourism Improvement District and General Manager at Southbridge Napa Valley, representing lodging. It seems like just a year ago I was up here saying the same thing, but once again, the TID has an annual budget for destination marketing, and we get to decide how to spend that money and who to support and who's going to do the best job to do it. I've been on the TID for 7 years, and for all 7 years, with pleasure, we've given our entire destination marketing budget to the St. Helena City Council, Chamber of Commerce, to Freudian slip there, to the Chamber of Commerce to do what they do so well, put heads in beds for us, bring visitors to St. Helena that'll keep our stores open and keep St. Helena the thriving business that it is. So once again, Joaquin and Amy, we're proud to support you, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Marquez?
I haven't done this in a long time. I forgot what I was supposed to say.
Don't be nervous.
I'm so nervous. It's great to see you all, and thank you guys so much. I know I just came up to say hello, but really I just wanted to say that all the years that I've been able to participate on the Chamber and with businesses and being a resident and raising my kids here, I'm really excited for the future of St. Helena. We're working with every one of you and the city and the town and all the residents to really work together, and I feel that we are on that path. So thank you for your support, and we look forward to 2018.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further Chamber board member? All right. Public comment? Other public comment?
Bobby's going to close the deal.
My name is Bobby Monana, speaking as a resident, and I just have a question. I mean, first of all, I think it's really a great idea to have the Chamber in town, closer to where people can go in and speak with whoever's there. I appreciate that, and I appreciate all the efforts. So I'm a little confused because I hear that one of the goals is to have a low impact, but the other goal seems to get as many hits as possible, like 2 million hits. I'm wondering if the goal is to get all of those hits to actually come here, and if so, what kind of vigilance there is, or even in awareness as to if you're too successful, if you really want to have a reasonable impact or not a detrimental impact, how many people coming here is the critical mass over which it might be detrimental to the city. I don't know if the Chamber has any of that in their algorithms or whatever is being used, and if they're working with other chambers in the valley about the same issue. Is there any communication between? I know probably maybe competition, but I'm just wondering how you see your great success in terms of low impact and how you think about that.
Right. Thank you. Good question.
Hi, Tracy Sweeney, 1407 Kearney Street, and I'm here both as a resident and as a Chamber board member. I think you've heard a lot. We appreciate all the funding and the support the city's given us, so I want to reiterate what my colleagues have said on thank you. But to speak a little bit to Bobby's point, I think it's good to clarify that the destination marketing and the heads to beds and the efforts that are being made is for specifically off-season. So we're not looking to bring travelers. We welcome guests year-round, of course, but our efforts and our initiatives are really around attracting visitors to the market when we don't have, in low season, which is really the winter months. And for many of our local businesses, that's the time it's difficult to survive. So there aren't enough local citizens supporting the businesses. If our restaurants could make it just on our local, that would be terrific. But that's really when they're lean. So the efforts that we're making on behalf of our businesses is to help them sustain the weaker, lower impact, the lower months, which is why we say low impact. Not when the roads are full, but when the beds are empty, trying to help putting people in.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further public input? All right. Let me close the public discussion. Mr. Razzo, you can take a seat. And I'll open it up for council discussion. Does anybody wish to lead off? No, I'm not looking at anybody. Not looking at anybody. Maybe a couple of comments from me as the mayor to begin with. It's very clear that the Chamber plays an important role in our business life here. I do think it's a big change for the Chamber to move from its prior location to Main Street. I think it's going to have some significant impact, which it's probably still trying to figure out, on how it staffs and operates, and that's natural. It will certainly have more folks dropping in than in the past. Reading another study, and perhaps a little responsive to Ms. Manette, because it stunned me a little bit, it said that there were 3.5 million visitors to Napa County each year, and about 1.5 million, and I don't really believe the number, but that's what it said. And this was a study that was put together for the City of Napa, that 1.5 million, one way or the other, made it up to St. Helena. That's a staggering number to my mind, and I'm not sure what it's based on. I simply throw it out there. What mostly concerns me is our downtown retail, and I look at the statistical section of the CAFR, the Consolidated Annual Financial Report, and it breaks down sales tax collected by business segment. And one of those segments is general retail. That does not include the restaurants. But when you look at general retail and sales tax collected by the city based on general retail, it hit a high about 2010. It's been on a downhill slide since 2010. And that, to me, is where I'm hopeful that the Chamber can come up with some helpful solutions to get more traffic into the stores. And I appreciate very much the comments of Ms. Sweeney that it's undoubtedly in the off-season where potentially survival for some of these stores is at stake, and the importance of getting folks in, traffic, and getting them into the stores and hotel rooms during the off-season. So that's very much on my mind. The other side of it is that when you look at the breakdown by business segment, and it's not broken down really the way I wished it were. If I were the dictator, it's dictated by state law. But one is food service, and that includes both the restaurants and I believe Safeway and other Sunshine and other stores. So it's not broken down just by restaurants, which is a problem. But that segment of our sales tax has been increasing since 2010. So it's clear that our restaurants, 3 of which were in the top 100, I noticed the other day, in the San Francisco Chronicle, are big destination draws. And that's important to us because that also helps support our store. So, I have no doubt myself as mayor as to the importance of this contract, but I hope as we move forward and evaluate the contract in future years that we speak plainly to downtown retail and look for marked improvement with respect to better occupancy of our downtown retail stores. It's not that they're that significant in terms of overall sales collection, but visually they are hugely significant, and so that's what kind of catches my eye. That's just an introductory statement.
And I would agree with everything you're saying, and I think it's also our responsibility as a city council and government to participate and collaborate with the chamber. Obviously, you know that we're embarking on a downtown retail study, and Mary and I are working on a subcommittee to try to get more details, get more data, and I think working together, I think we can. It's not just getting people in, it's getting the businesses in so that the people can go to those businesses. Obviously, we have a lot of empty businesses, so it's an extremely complicated issue, but you've been consistent in your analysis with respect to general retail sales tax from 2010 to today. And upon your recommendation, I have looked at the CAFR, and yes, it's there's something there that we need to, it's an alert, something's going on, that we need to work together with the business owners, not only the chamber, but other business people in general to move forward. And so I agree with you, Mayor, on that.
All right.
Yeah, I think the move to downtown is a great thing. I think it'll pay off in the long run. It's better for you to be closer to our downtown businesses, I think, frankly, and to be recommending them to people as a place to go eat or go shop. I do think that whatever is happening in our downtown is going to be largely our responsibility, not necessarily put on your back, but I can think of a few things that we could do, and in a year, or when are we doing these sidewalks? 2 years. I think that the city and the chamber could get together now and start to figure out how we are going to help our businesses through this disruption, whether it's inviting people through the back door or some kind of program so that businesses that are having a difficult time hopefully won't see the sidewalk improvement as a setback to them. I think that, I don't want to tell you how to market, but I don't know if you're cross-marketing some of our little businesses with people who are showing up at wineries or whatever, but anything you can do, I think, for our downtown businesses would be helpful. And even just for those of us who live here and who are not tourists, to know what you can purchase or where you can go right in St. Helena and get something that you may not have known existed here. Sort of a, reference for those of us who need a printer or need, anything.
Soap. Well, we had a wonderful presentation at Rotary Day by the soap company.
Oh.
I'm glad you took a shower, Mayor.
And lastly, I just want to say that, the city and the chamber are working on a event that I hope will come off and be a good thing for next winter and maybe years beyond. And there's a little work to be done on that yet, and it may involve some tinkering to the contract as far as when money is dished out so that we can pay for some of the community events. So in the end here, I'm going to recommend that maybe one or two of us get together with the chamber and just hammer out the need and the details so that we could bring back whatever amendments are necessary to make it work for next year.
All right.
Couple of things. First of all, yes, we're working on this holiday program that's pretty exciting, and as we push forward, hopefully the pieces start coming together. Let's see. I think we've got to talk a little bit over, how we're allotting or asking $30,000 be spent on community events, and I think we have to get a little clear definition of what we all mean by that. One thing I'll say is that although St. Helena is a famous food and wine destination, the things about it for me that are critically important are our humanitarianism and our commitment to democracy. And growing up here, those were always the foundations that were beyond even things like food and wine. So as we talk about our city and branding and marketing, I do like to remind us all that while food and wine are important, so are our commitment to democracy and humanitarianism. and somebody said a really great comment the other day. I was at a forum, and we were talking about sustainability, and the person used the word, and he said, listen, if you were talking about your relationship or your marriage, and somebody asked you how it was, and you said, no, it's sustainable, you'd say, it'd be like, wow, that's not great. So I think if we can even go beyond that and say that we want to have a relationship that's thriving, it's balanced, but it's thriving, it's more than we could, do separately, and we do it together. So anyway, that's where I'm hoping we're going, and it seems to me we're going in a good direction. So thank you for all your efforts. And I think moving to downtown was great, and it brings you right into the center of it, and it'll make a big difference. So thank you.
Well, Mr. White,
Yeah. Well, I would like to say that I think moving to downtown was a great move. I think it'll pay off quite a bit. I've always been in favor of investing back into our community, and I think this is the council's chance to do that. And if we're going to support our businesses, I think this is a minimal way of doing it and supporting the chamber and its members. So I'm all in favor of continuing this contract, and of course I've always been in favor of adding to it, but I've never gotten that support. but we need to invest back into where our lifeblood comes from. And two-thirds of our economy comes from our businesses and, our TOT and businesses. So thank you.
Well, let's see where we are here. I think it sounds to me like we have a general consensus on the budgeted amount, and where we need a little further work, at least listening to Ms. Goberstein, is on the contract amendments, and Mr. Ellsworth as well, and possibly Mr. Doring, that the contract amendments need a little work, and perhaps a couple of city council members to work with the chamber to come back with an amendment would be a good idea. Now, that's included right within the scope of this? I'm reading liberally.
Yes, that's included in the recommendation, and I would enjoy being part of that as well.
Yeah, okay. Well, my suggestion would be that since Mr. Doring and Ms. Goberstein are already part of a group, that they work with the chamber to come up with the contract amendment language, if that's satisfactory to them.
Yes.
All right. Is there consensus of the council? So that would be the direction. We're in agreement on the budgeted amount, and that hopefully they'll come back quickly, and it's a little concerning, I suppose, to put two lawyers on the subcommittee to deal with the chamber, but please don't lawyer up yourselves. All right. Thank you very much. I think that takes us on to 10.2. Let me take that one out. Don't feel you have to stay if you don't wish. This is consideration and proposed approval of resolution rescinding Resolution 2013-26, dealing with our rules and coming up with new rules and standards of conduct. I said new rules. I really revisions of the new rules. This comes about as a result of a subcommittee of the council that consisted of myself and council member Doring. I would say that what we've done is mostly fine-tuned what we had before. One change is to go in public comment from 3 minutes to 4 minutes. The California standard is 3 minutes, but we think that our community will not abuse 4 minutes, so I think we reached agreement that it would give just a little more flexibility in public comment if we went to 4 minutes. The other item, which I think both of us came to the feeling was a mistake, was the ability of members to cede their time. We looked at Yachtel's procedures, and it was very clear that that wasn't allowed. And somehow we kind of think that when ours got retyped some years back, the no was missed out. But In any event, that's another change. We will not allow members of the public to cede their time to some other member. That makes it very difficult to conduct meetings, and as I say, I believe we're just correcting a typographical mistake. Let me let Mr. Doring speak a little bit more to the standards of conduct. I've already now forgotten the name of the city that we used as our template, but we both worked together on this.
Many cities. Belmont was a primary source.
Right.
I also wanted to, Mr. Mayor, on another issue that I think is relatively different and new is how we select our committee members. Do you want to talk about that? Or
No, go ahead.
At this point, we have implemented a rule where we will have interviews at the council level in a special meeting, so there won't be the need for individual member interviews. People will be brought to the council on a special meeting. We will listen to those who want to make presentations, and then at another meeting, a second meeting, we will, I guess I should be having you do this, but if I'm wrong, let me know, because I think that's right. Then at a regular meeting, then we will appoint those through a ballot process. So with the mayor, of course, having the ability that he retains to make nominations for folks that he has a preference for, but it will be through a sort of a combination ballot measure with the mayor making the final nominations and needing a majority vote, as we always do.
Right. I think the point that Mr. Doring's making is that by state law, at the end of the day, it's just a function of the mayor to make the nomination, and the mayor's not going to make a nomination that he doesn't believe in. So there we are. But in general, I've undertaken to listen to my colleagues and accept their recommendations in the past. It's been my practice. It's worked out relatively well.
Can you elaborate on, in that section, it says, the council shall rank all applicants from highest to lowest and appoint by ballot process.
What page is that?
What are the this is on page 146. It's the last paragraph. Just how does that work? How does
Maybe city could answer this.
So it's not going to be a secret ballot, but each council member will have a ballot, and you get to rank who you would like to be chosen to be placed on whatever committee. Then the city clerk would collect all the ballots. I would note hash marks who received the highest votes, and then in turn I would turn them over to the mayor, and so he could read aloud the highest vote getters, and of course the majority would vote the committee member in.
So the ballot would not be binding on the mayor. In other words, it would be a preference for the council, as I understand it, because we can't change state law and take that right away. So it's a combination.
Is that a public record?
Yes, it would be.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to know.
And look, this is, as with any change, I hope it works. I hope it works well. But if it isn't working for us, then we should come to grips with it and change it. It's not.
So would this put out the list of nominees? Thank you. Would this, if there was numerous positions to be filled, would there be a list of the nominees presented to the full council ahead of time? I mean,
the idea is to have a collaborative effort when you have a special council meeting, so that you could interview each applicant. And if an applicant isn't able to attend the meeting, they can always submit something in writing, talking about their qualifications. And then when you come back at the meeting and you have the process of voting for whichever members that you would like, the top votes, those are the members that will be brought forward then to the mayor for announcement.
But all applicants have to file an application, so there will be a universe of applicants for any particular position or series of positions. So you'll know well ahead exactly who is applying.
So, for instance, in June, we'll have some sort of special meeting before we get to the
Correct.
various appointments that people's terms are expiring. Okay.
And a side note, we are in a recruitment process right now, and I don't have many applicants.
Okay.
We've worn them out.
So, is there any further discussion? Any public comment? Yes, now's the chance. And you have 3 minutes. We haven't gotten to 4 minutes
I have
yet.
several questions. I didn't know whether to use my time, just ask them all, and then you can use time to answer them, or do one by one. But anyway, I didn't get the answer to Councilmember Ellsworth's question. What I thought it was, will all the council members have a ranked list before the meeting?
Before the meeting when people are nominated and voted on?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what I heard asked, and anyway, I have that question. Or only the mayor? I mean, I don't.
No, the mayor's not going to have any special information. My understanding is that we'll hear the applicants at a special meeting, and then when we move to approve the applicants, all members of the council are going to be asked to rank those who have applied. Let's just say you get 3 folks for one position, 1, 2, 3. City clerk will accumulate that, assemble that, and say that X received the most votes, so Y the next, and Z the next, and then the mayor will make a nomination. At the end of the day, it's the mayor's. He doesn't have to follow that by state law, but again, as I've said in the past, my practice has been to listen carefully to my colleagues, and absent exceptional circumstances, I'm confident that in most cases that's the way it would work, not just for me, but for any mayor.
So I was just wondering if the other members of the council will also get that list.
Yes.
We have to, because we're the one ranking.
Yeah.
Okay, but you'll see the results of them. You only know your own
absolutely.
ranking.
The results will be
totally transparent.
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
And I guess, sorry.
What?
Go ahead.
I guess the circumstance comes up where there's say 6 positions to be filled, and if we don't know ahead of time the slate, it makes it more difficult to give a yes or no vote if we can't see where it's going. Does that make sense? Because
you're going to have. Let's assume hypothetically that you had that we're creating a new committee with 5 folks, and we had 15 applicants. We would then rank. They would then be ranked, and then you would not present them as a slate. You would present them one by one, going through the list. But you would know what the ranking was.
All right.
So that should give enough information.
Well, hopefully.
Okay. I'm a little confused, too, about council members being able to put something on the agenda. What I heard you say is that, what there's supposed to be a second. There are supposed to be 2 people who say.
Correct.
But you said that you're de facto, you approve of anything that anyone would want. So
within extreme limits, okay. I'm likely to approve to be a second. Yes.
But you're not necessarily always going to be there. So
that's right.
10, 20 years. So.
You're giving me a lot of longevity.
So,
I don't know that I like that.
I was just wondering if it needs 2 people, if it really does need 2 people, and that one council person cannot.
We think that's an appropriate check and balance. The mayor or any 2 people.
Yeah. Despite what the mayor says, I think we're going to stay with the practice of one person introduces, you get a nod from a second, and that's why we'll proceed. Okay. I think the mayor basically was saying that he generally doesn't have an issue if one person does want something on an agenda, he has no problem with that. But I think we'll still do a formal process where we'll get the consent. Okay. He may be the second person every single time.
Okay. All right. Then on page 8 of my stuff, it says when there's addressing the council at land use public hearings, it says the last 5 minutes at close of public comment. Oh, let's see.
What number are you on? What number?
Okay, it's under B. It's a few sentences down.
Under 2.4.
Applicant shall first be permitted 5 minutes at the close of public comments for rebuttal. And then the following sentence implies that the applicant and also the appellant will have 5 minutes. So I'm confused. Which is it? Because the next sentence says that 15, 15, 5, 5.
All right. So, this is the issue that comes up when the applicant is not the appellant but the appellee. And the idea behind this is really to codify our practice, which our city attorney has said is required by due process, to give the applicant appellee the last word. In that situation where the applicant has, for example, prevailed in the Planning Commission but finds its project is under appeal to the City Council. So that's the way that's worded, and that's what we sought to accomplish. And that was well vetted, I think, by myself and Mr. Doring, and possibly Mr. Brown as well. But no?
I agree.
Okay, that's a little clearer.
I haven't been involved, but I have reviewed this, and I'm very comfortable with it. There is a line of cases, as you pointed out, in the due process context that suggests that a project applicant has a special stake in the outcome of those proceedings.
All right. Anything further?
Yeah, I just had on 2.21 quorum.
Wait, on what page are you on, please?
I'm on 14 of my, I don't
right.
know, I think your pages are different, but 2.2. It's just a little confusing. It says a member who is withdrawn from the meeting without being excused by majority vote of the remaining members shall be counted as present. But, I mean, are you talking about conflict of interest, people who remove themselves there? Is that a separate category?
Let me read it again. Majority, actually.
I mean, I don't think the council has to excuse someone who's recusing themselves. It's a difference. Okay, I didn't know.
Mr. Doring, can you speak to that?
No. I don't think it's... I'm not sure if it's actually speaking to somebody who is recusing themselves and someone walks out of the room, basically. They don't have to recuse themselves. I think that's what it means, or leaves the meeting early or whatever.
Right.
I think that's what it's getting to, more than a formal, I'm recusing myself for a conflict of interest. I don't think this is getting to that, but I'll let the
Under the Political Reform Act, if a council member is required to recuse him or herself, they are not counted for purposes of quorum.
Okay, so it's different then. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't want that one. Okay, I just wondering if you could help me understand how to think about page 17, 2.25, the Rosenberg rules.
Say it again. Which one?
2.25.
Oh, Rosenberg's rules?
Yes, I just need to understand how to think about this, because it says that the city shall be governed by them, but there's no ordinance or other action that the council shall be invalidated or that the legality thereof otherwise affected by the failure or omission of the council to observe or follow such rules. So it sounds like you're required to follow them if there are no consequences if you don't. I just don't know how to think about that. I thought maybe someone could help me think about that.
I'm happy to weigh in that articulates what the rule of law has always been. That with respect to rules of order, typically a failure to abide by a rule of order or rule of procedure will not invalidate a substantive decision.
So the FPPC wouldn't be interested in that?
Well, the FPPC rules are different than this. This is talking about Rosenberg's rules. I believe the city's previous rules adopted Robert's Rules of Order, which were far more arcane and difficult to use. Rosenberg's is easier. Rosenberg's is simply a set of parliamentary rules that most cities now are adopting.
Okay, thank you for explaining. And one last thing. On the Code of Ethics, I'm wondering, it talks about giving the appearance of bias, and I'm wondering that if a person writes a letter, does that mean that anyone on the council or commissions should not be writing letters to the newspaper about political issues or issues that they might be voting on, unless can they do that if they define themselves as speaking as a citizen as opposed to their role, or should they not be doing it at all? What kind of restraints involved in giving the impression that there might be a bias?
So this rule, like most of these rules, reflects a fairly good understanding of what the law in California is. In California, there are rules of due process that give stakeholders, particularly in I talked about this in our land use updates, in adjudicative decision-making, where the city council or the planning commission is acting as a judge as opposed to acting as a rule maker. Due process principles apply, and those rules require that the decision-makers be fair and unbiased and not have prejudged the decision. That standard, that due process standard, by the way, does not apply to the city council when it's acting in its legislative capacity. It's presumed, for example, that city council members do have strong opinions and biases when they write laws. So this rule is largely affecting when the city is acting as a judge, and there's a line of cases that deals with what constitutes a bias in a decision maker in an adjudicatory capacity. And when I'm talking about acting as a judge, that's like on a use permit or a subdivision map or a design review. And bias, one of the indicators of bias is when a decision maker prior to the hearing has already made clear to the world that they are an advocate for or against a certain decision. Often writing a letter to the newspaper can indicate that. The rules are slightly different, I believe, with respect to elected city council members than they are for appointed planning commissioners, typically because I think there is a heightened First Amendment right recognized in elected officials to articulate their views to a constituency in the context of running for office. And there's a case from the early 1970s involving the city of Fairfield that adopted that rule. All of this is a very, very long-winded way of saying that all decision makers, whether they be elected council members or planning commissioners, need to be sure that when they're making statements about an adjudicatory decision, a use permit, a design review, and so forth, before that decision, that you're really not looking like you've prejudged, like you've made up your mind. And I've always cautioned that all of you in that position, you don't have to check your opinions completely. You can say, I have strong concerns about this project, but I will not make up my mind or prejudge this until I've heard all of the evidence at the hearing. That gives all of the stakeholders in the decision an ability to, and I think some assurance that the people making a decision, you all, on their projects, are going to be fair and unbiased and will be listening just to the evidence presented at the public hearing. That's what these rules are trying to get to.
Okay, and I guess I have one last thing really quick. In a couple of places, and I don't have it here, it says that the city staff can be used to help council members on policy issues. It does not say whether the staff can help council members on legislative issues. So, on judicial issues. But so I'm wondering if that's true or if,
I would construe policy issues to be broad. In other words, a legislative issue is a policy issue.
Okay.
So,
and okay. So those are the two.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further public comment? Let me close the public comment. Any further council
and
discussion?
Just by the way, this code of conduct applies to all members of city committees, boards, planning commission, not just the city council. Board members will have to sign that they acknowledge it, receiving and reading it. There's some question. I don't think state law can force city council members to do that, but probably it's prudent for them to do that from a political perspective. But I don't think we can be mandated to sign it. So it's a question. If someone raised an issue why there's a difference, I think that is the difference. I will sign it when I receive it. So I don't know about the rest of it, but I assume we will.
After all the time I've put into it, I'm certainly signing it.
Can you run that by me again? What did you say? You can't be forced to sign it?
An elected official cannot be forced to sign it. However, as he pointed out, prudentially, an elected official would be wise to sign it. The second time I've used the word wise or wisdom.
Appointed required to sign it?
Yes. And we don't, that would vitiate the appointment if they didn't. We can make it a condition of appointment.
Yeah. Ms. Monette brought up an issue with media. Is there a line or a limit about how much a council person can use public media, public newspapers as a forum? Is there any precedent for discussion of that?
Are you talking about a legislative issue?
Well, sort of any kind of what would be the word I'm looking for? Using the media as a pulpit, as a broadcast medium, is there an ethical line that hasn't ever been discussed as a?
Well, from my perspective, from what I see in the code, is that council members, when they're out in the public, they have to indicate whether they are speaking on their own behalf or representing the city. If they're representing the city, then they have to be consistent with city policy. Now, certainly, I suppose a council member can take issue with a city policy, but they have to be careful that what they say is not construed as city policy if it's their own individual opinion and not a city council's policy opinion. I think that's a difference. And if they do stray, I think, and I think it's a good lesson for me, I write letters occasionally to the paper on various broader big picture items, and I probably will have the Star do me a favor and have on the bottom of that Council Member Doring is speaking on his individual behalf and not as a representative on a city policy issue, something like that, just so that we're all clear. But I don't think this code of conduct is meant to prohibit council members or anyone else's free speech rights. I think people have a right to write letters as much as they want. I think they have to be, there has to be a sense of propriety with respect to the content of the letter. And the content of the letter is slamming some other council member, probably not a good idea, probably a violation of the code of conduct. So, I mean, there are some parameters in general with respect to how we treat staff, how we treat our fellow council members, how we treat board and other members. There's a certain decorum that's expected, and I think we are all going to do that. So if that answers your question, I think it gives enough freedom to write letters, but there are some basic codes of decorum that we should probably all take a look at.
Mr. Brown?
Mr. Mayor, if I might just emphasize again that you do have, I agree that council members do have free speech rights to communicate through the media. Again, when you're talking about something that involves an adjudicative decision, when you're acting as a judge on a use permit, tentative map, design review, other, a code enforcement appeal, where someone has due process rights, it's in that context that council members need to be very cautious not to be looking as though they've prejudged the outcome of that, because you will be called upon to act as a judge, hear evidence, and make a decision based solely on the evidence you hear as in your official role as a council member. And that's just a qualification on what I think you correctly said.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Any further council discussion?
Yeah, I have a couple comments. I'm looking on page 136 of our materials. This is item 2.3A. It says the agenda of business to come before the council shall normally be closed at the end of 18 business days preceding the meeting. I think that's far too long.
Well,
is that?
This was. I'll let Mr. Prestwich respond to that. He had an email from me on that was word for word the same.
Yeah, that would be impossible.
Well,
no.
In efforts of publishing the agenda 2 weeks early, we have to have a window for staff to submit the staff reports, have the city manager have the time to review them, approve them, and then time for me to package it up for you. So it's an internal.
It didn't seem like it was 18 days, though, when I looked at the calendar, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. What we're referring to is the Friday preceding the Friday which we post the agenda. So right now we're publishing 11 days prior to the council meetings, typically. And 1 week earlier is the formal deadline for the staff to submit their reports in our queue. And then that provides me about 3 days to review all of the reports and work with the staff on editing any of those that need edits.
Okay. Substantively, a couple of other things. The section on sanctions.
Can you come up with a page number, please?
Yeah, this is 3.4. I think, we talk about we might sanction somebody for repeated behavior or whatever that we all find contrary to the code. I think it would be worthwhile if we maybe had a first step, like maybe an admonition or something, so that we have a record that you did this once before and we thought it maybe crossed the line, so that we have created kind of a record that if we're going to get to the point and actually sanction somebody for repeatedly doing something, we have a record of it. Secondly, this section sort of seems to be lacking in process. You know, there's another section that deals with board, committee, and commission members, and there's a lot more detail on the process and what we actually do. You know, and I'm going to suggest that we incorporate that language in the city council section. There's, if you're following what I'm saying, it's kind of unclear. The matter gets referred to the mayor or the vice mayor, and then it doesn't go on to say what happens next. Whereas in the earlier section, dealing with the boards and commissions, there's a lot more detail. And I think we should add something about the due process rights of the person who's sort of the target or whatever. That's a bad word, but some opportunity for that person to say something in their defense or whatever.
One observation I have is I think there's a distinction between how we treat electeds, and that's more of a political consequence ultimately, and how we deal with, it's probably unfair, but that's the way the law is, boards, commissions, and other board members. So there's a little bit more detail on how we deal with the board members, less detail. Frankly, I thought about that, and I know that would raise some concern. Other cities I know have a very detailed sort of process with censure, those kinds of things. I think we have to be careful with city council members. First of all, I know that there's a lot of case law out there. There's a lot of law on due process, and I think that we can't just bypass due process. There's got to be, I don't know how much detail we want to get into. If somebody raised an issue, and it was repeated, and they put it on a calendar, there would be sort of a normal process. I don't know how much more detail we'd want other than some general, right to a hearing, right to, ask questions of the witnesses. Those are things I would assume that would be required. I know there's case law, for example, on those issues, so I assume we would abide by law. One of the things I want to avoid is getting overly detailed, because I think if you get overly detailed, then you end up restricting your ability to act. And I know there may be situations where it could, well, not in St. Helena, not on this council, but there could be a situation where something has to be referred to not just the council, but to the district attorney or some more heightened concern. And so I wouldn't want us to be hemmed in on the rules we make. I think we have to take it as it comes. And frankly, I don't want to be in the business of sanctioning or censuring. I think I would prefer to just take it as it comes, with the idea that, yes, we will act with due process, because that's what we're required to do anyway, if that makes sense to you. But I'm open to some suggestions, maybe a couple sentences or maybe a paragraph that you would want to introduce. I don't know what that would be, where it would be, but I think it would be a little bit different than how we treat board members and commission members, because that's a different law, and they're not elected. So, I mean, we can't just toss somebody, obviously, because we're elected. The citizens have that final decision.
Well, like for instance, if we're going to impose sanctions on a board member, this kind of discipline, I'm reading the second paragraph here on page 26 under boards and commissions, any form of discipline shall be determined by a majority vote of at least a quorum of the council at a noticed public meeting. Such action shall be preceded by a report to the council with supporting documentation. There's nothing like that when we're sanctioning a council member. So are we just kind of making it up as we go along, or?
I tend to agree with Council Member Doring here. Let's look at this. Council members who intentionally and repeatedly do not follow proper conduct. It's going to be very apparent if there's intentional and repetitious failure to follow proper conduct, because some council member, e.g. Mr. Doring, is going to raise a point of order and say that's not proper conduct. It's going to be in the record. And if it continues into subsequent council meetings, you've got your record right there. And the council at some point, if it becomes intolerable, has to decide whether it's going to result in a reprimand or censure, but the record itself will be made, I would think, in the council meeting itself through points of order and that kind of thing.
Is that how we're going to do it? I mean, are we going to call each other out here at meetings, or is it?
It is self-enforcing, yes. The answer is yes.
Because it says what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to report to the mayor or the vice mayor. I mean, up above when it says how this process works.
On the top of page 26, it says, individual council members should point out to the offending council member perceived infractions of the code of conduct, code of ethics, and conduct. If the offenses continue, then the matter should be referred to the mayor in private. So yes, if we're not acting in accordance with this code of conduct, then we are obligated to self-enforce. Nobody else out there is going to do that but us.
Okay, and what you're saying is I'm going to do that like to you at a public meeting instead of privately saying to you, Paul, you're doing this. I mean, this is going to become this is where these grievances are aired, or is that our public meetings? I didn't quite get that from the way it was written.
It doesn't say whether it should be public. I think that's, I'll leave that to your discretion. I probably wouldn't want to embarrass someone publicly. I mean, there's got to be a way to point that out to somebody.
That's why I was kind of looking for an admonition or something. Like if I say to Peter 3 times, so-and-so's done this, would you do something about it? That there would be some written something.
Peter's going to deny it each time.
Is there turn to Paul and say, Paul, will you stop that?
Is there a role for the city manager in? I think what I'm looking at what Mary's saying is if it's just us. I don't know what works has worked in other cities or other.
I know this is uncomfortable, but I think we have to take the responsibility to call each other out when we need to. I think that's important, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. We can do it in a respectful manner. Look,
Then why
and let's just try it. Let's just try it. If we need more guidance in terms of how we act, this is just like a family at home, frankly, with children. I don't know if we need to have 20 pages of rules. We can have maybe a little bit more in terms of. I'm open, as I said, to a suggestion. I just don't. What I wanted to avoid is a 6-page. This is how you do it in this case, in that case. I think it really diminishes us, frankly, and it puts maybe too much emphasis on sanctions and not enough emphasis on, hey, let's get along, folks. And I expect if I offended somebody and violated this code of conduct, I expect somebody to call me out on it. I do.
Okay, it just doesn't make sense to me that it says you're supposed to point out to the offending member, and then if it continues, the matter would be referred to the mayor in private. I mean, the mayor's obviously going to know if we're sitting here calling each other out at public meetings over something. It just didn't make sense to me that part of it's private and how it was actually going to work.
Well, again, maybe that paragraph needs a little reworking to make it clear. I mean, I didn't focus my attention on that one paragraph, but I could see your point. I'm open to working on that one paragraph if you want to suggest something. Maybe it needs a little bit of work. I don't know. I don't have any wordsmithing suggestions right now unless you want to do that.
Well, I guess I don't think this is the right forum for wordsmithing, quite frankly, on something that is not as that has some degree of complexity to it. So I guess my suggestion would be that we defer adopting this for the moment. I hate doing that, but we defer adopting this for the moment, and Mr. Doring and I will go back and take another look and bring it right back in the next 2 weeks.
How do we not violate the Brown Act and still meet the needs of council members Ellsworth and Coberstein with respect to suggestions? Can we entertain any suggested paragraph that they may give us or not?
If they send their suggestions through the city manager then can, and those would be public records. I've personally been involved in censure situations, and there is no more unpleasant situation for a city council to find itself in. It's full of potential legal problems as well, and I'd be happy to consult with you on some of these issues. There are issues I spot here that are problematic, and if and when you ever get to a place where you are considering censure, it's one that you have to, proceed with extreme caution, because it almost always will give rise to litigation.
All right, well, then I suggest we suspend consideration of this for a couple of weeks, and Mr. Ellsworth, Ms. Culverstein get any suggestions over to the city manager, and then Mr. Doring and I will get together as quickly as possible and hopefully get back to this rapidly. Is that satisfactory to everybody?
And I just wanted to know if everybody's comfortable with the provisions that we put in regarding the rotating mayor.
You did that?
I missed that.
Okay.
Sorry, but I wasn't going to say anything.
All I could say is that I may have to take more seriously my eye doctor's suggestion that I need cataract surgery. Okay, 10.3. Oh, this comes about because the county is leading an effort with the cities to put on the November ballot a 1% TOT tax increase that would be devoted to workforce housing. And it's a complicated problem, and let me just spell out why it's complicated, and that is that it invokes both the election code and the tax code. And under the tax code, each city has authority exclusively within its jurisdiction to impose a TOT tax on hotels in its jurisdiction. In other words, the county, for example, cannot impose a TOT tax on hotels inside the city of St. Helena. Conversely, when you're dealing with the county, its officers are elected countywide. Its initiatives at the county level are voted on by everybody, including folks in the city, meaning that if the county puts a 1% TOT tax on the ballot, it would apply only in the incorporated area, but if it's devoted to to workforce housing, for example, it would require a 2/3 vote, and that would include counting votes of the residents of all the cities. So that the bottom line is that in order to accomplish what at least some supervisors wish to accomplish, it requires on our ballot 2 TOT measures. One that would apply strictly in the city of St. Helena, and the other would apply with everybody in St. Helena voting on it only in the unincorporated area. And so that to my way of thinking, is a confusing, difficult complexity that would require a lot of public explanation for people to understand. And it's very concerning to me that the tax code and the election code work in that dysfunctional way, as I see it. I absolutely put it to the registrar of voters as to whether you could carve out the county voters from the city voters and put the county one simply to the county voters, and that's illegal under state law. So I tried, but that's the conundrum that we find ourselves in with respect to the legality of the situation. Now, let me see whether there's some initial council comment, and then let me open it up for public comment, and then we'll go back and have a further council discussion. Any further initial? Well, let's hear from the public. Is anybody here from the public that wishes to speak to this issue? I thought I saw Tracy Schultze here earlier, but maybe she had a different issue. I don't know. She's not here from the county.
Good evening again, Marcel from Southbridge, Napa Valley, representing lodging. Lodging is in support of this extra 1% tax. I think the big key for everybody to understand is it's going to be about voter education. It's not going to affect residents, and it's not going to affect voters. It's going to be a self-fulfilling tax. So visitors visiting lodging entities will be paying this tax to go into special funds for housing. When people are voting, they're thinking, I don't want to pay any more taxes. That's the shock factor of taxes. This one's self-fulfilling, so we just need to get that word out, and part of the education is to get that word out that visitors will be supporting and paying this. They're already paying a tax which is clumped together as a line item. I don't think from 14 to 15% is unreasonable in this demographic.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further public comment?
Bobby Manon speaking as a resident. I just have a question. Is it possible for the city to have its own, I think you said, have put its own TOT tax issue on the ballot, on the city? Is that correct? So the city could do its own without working with the county? Is that
Yes, but the city tax is only going to be imposed on properties inside the city limits.
Right, okay.
All right, and the annual amount is about $250,000.
Okay.
That's at least at current sales tax, at current TOT levels. Yeah, okay, thank
so
you.
it's possible.
Well, that's the way TOT is imposed inside city limits, is by vote of city residents.
Tracy Sweeney, 1407 Kearney Street. Maybe it might be helpful if Marcel explains the difference between TOT and TID. That might be helpful for some of the audience, and what the TID means locally.
All right, certainly if you wish to come back and explain the difference, right. You know, I think the issue, given the complexity of the ballot picture, as I described it, is if the industry, which I think is marvelous, is behind increasing the tax on lodging, and it could do it through the TID, increasing the TID from 2% to 3%. That's a self-assessment that can, in fact, work countywide and avoid the complications that I described with respect to the ballots. Now, having said that, I also understand that this has been much discussed inside the lodging industry, and while I don't understand the reasons, it's been communicated to me, regrettably, that it's impractical for one reason or another. Now, I'm just throwing that out there, and maybe you can correct me.
I'm going to ask April to also help with some of these numbers if I need assistance. But currently, every guest in St. Helena pays 14% occupancy tax, which is a tax and an assessment fee. That 14% is divided 12% and 2%. The 2% is going towards TID and the city, and it's broken out. All of that is already allocated and accounted for. So to take from that or to add more onto TID, it's just not the way a budget works. If you want to have 1% go towards housing, you need to charge 1% more, is perhaps the simplest way I can explain it.
Is the issue that you can't increase the TID from 2% to 3 percentage points and devote it to workforce housing because that would not be consistent with the way that TID is set up?
I don't know. I can't speak to that.
Okay. I mean, I don't know. Obviously,
the governing body on this would be the Napa Valley Tourism Improvement District and the NVTC, and perhaps we can have Catherine or a representative from them come and speak further and clarify it. I'm afraid I cannot.
Okay, thank you. This is one of the huge problems with this initiative coming up in such a short time frame, is that these questions percolate to the top, that as we come into a meeting like this, you would hope that you would have answers more or less ahead of time, but we are where we are, not due to our own making, but because of the timetable that the county wishes to impose on us. Let me close. Any further public comment? So, yeah, please, I'll close the public hearing. Yeah, Mr. Ellsworth.
There's a component of this that I feel like hasn't really been looked at. When we talk about housing, I think we also have to talk about wages in that same model, as we're looking to make a long-term, more than sustainable community. How do wages tie in? And if an industry is dependent on paying lower wages, and then it forces it creates housing problems that need subsidizing. Are we creating a model that we're going to constantly be chasing? Or is there a way of balancing wages in the discussion too, so that if we are thinking of an additional tax, we also have a component that asks that a certain wage level be reached so that people can self-fulfill rather than looking for subsidization, and nothing black and white, but talking about gray areas of balance. And the wage and labor discussion has been sort of left out as we talk about housing. And I'm hoping, as I think I mentioned, trying to put together a sort of forum on this in August, both for hospitality, winery, and vineyard work. How does this balance in with our housing discussion? So I feel like there's a lot to discuss, and I'm not there yet really in understanding how just this satisfies what we're trying to do. I feel like there's some more elements.
Well, I mean, I don't know that I have much of a response to that other than to say, and I think Ms. Koberstein focused on this at the 2x2 meeting that we were at the other evening, we both did, that when you're dealing with the hospitality industry and you're looking at their low-income workers, it's shockingly low. Typically, what, $39,000, $40,000 a year, Ms. Koberstein? That was it. Now, often those families have two incomes, but even with two incomes and given the price of workforce housing, it's very unclear to me that the wage level in the industry is going to really be sufficient to accommodate further affordable housing that's built for workforce housing. Most of those people still are not going to get into a category where the rents are something they can afford, even if they're at the moderate level. That's just a conundrum.
I have a couple comments. We're being asked to either opt into this program or get out or do our own thing very quickly by the end of June, so that all of the communities that are in it at 1% restricted to housing, city attorneys work together, we get our TOT ordinances fixed up, we get our ballot, our measure on the ballot. And to me, the question, and I'm hoping we can maybe have a straw poll tonight, is are we in or are we doing something differently? And I think it's a little bit unfortunate that as we are just ready to roll out this white paper and really explain to people what our local issues are and really explain to them how we hoped to address them through legislative means plus financial means, this financial thing is now just roared to the front, of the line. And, when we talked about TOT, I think we talked about a number of things to come to the council, like maybe we have a certain floor level of TOT, and above that we dedicate, for a certain number of years, we dedicate the money to housing, or maybe we take the TOT from short-term rentals for a couple of years and we dedicate that. This is another thing. This is 1% TOT in perpetuity going into the housing fund. And I personally think we should go in a different direction. I mean, we know what our issues are here. I don't think one size fits all. I mean, I think what might work in Calistoga or works in Yountville may not be the best choice for us. And but we're facing TOT, and it's going to be on the ballot. And how many years can you go back and have a TOT measure? So I do think if we're going to do something, we should do it now. And I would be more in favor of an unrestricted fund, a 51% vote, to increase our TOT here. Which I'm fairly confident we could make the case, as you made the case for Measure D, and we could get it passed. And I'd even suggest we maybe go to 2%, so we're actually getting something out of it, and make the case to our residents as to why we need this, not just for housing for hotel workers, but housing in general and other legitimate general fund purposes that we need to grapple with, like our fire department, our roads, to not earmark it. I mean, I'm sorry to say that because I believe strongly in doing something for housing, but I think that where we are right now, we need to have some discretion and ability to be a little more nimble than to just go for 1% forever and ever. Those are my thoughts.
Mr. White or Mr. Doring?
I just wanted to point out an answer to the question that you raised. In our report on page 195, the letter from Visit Napa Valley, there is a paragraph here on the issue of fair housing, and I'll just read it for the record. Further, fair housing law adds a complicating factor to utilizing a TID structure to fund workforce housing. TID law requires a direct benefit to those businesses paying the assessment. Housing law and use of matching housing funds does not allow preferences related to industry or place of employment. TID funding would not generate enough revenue to complete a housing development, and staff would be limited in seeking matching funds subject to housing law. It goes on to explain you can pass a law, but that law would have to be at the state level, and so that gets to that point. And then with respect to Mary's point, I'm sort of leaning, if you're wanting a sense of it, I'm sort of leading to the local control and deciding what we want to do with it and slowing it down just a little bit. Obviously, we have a little bit of time before we have to put a ballot measure on, but for a November, I mean, I'm still looking at a November election, but I think that we can garner the support on a general tax, a TOT, not a special tax that requires a 2/3 vote. I frankly think that's going to, even though that is other people's money, visitors' money, I still think, as you explained, it's going to be difficult for people to understand the difference between the two. It's not impossible. I frankly think that we can get a 50 plus 1% tax here, and I haven't thought through the 1% or 2%, but it's intriguing and something certainly to think about. Then we can sort of take advantage of this need to tax, but then we can use some of that money for local issues that may come up. I mean, housing is certainly a priority. There's no question about it, but we have a lot of priorities. So I'm kind of thinking along the lines of what Mary's suggesting. St. Helena marches to its own drum, so.
That's what
I mean, even the mayor was a proponent of Measure C. I mean, my gosh.
That's what I hear from my county colleagues.
Go back to that.
Mr. White.
I tend to agree with Mary and Paul. I think the 1% for us is pretty insignificant, and unless we go to 2% or we even take part of our 12 and put it towards housing, we're never going to get anywhere with it. So I would be more in favor of going with maybe a 2% or something more than 1, and really trying to make a difference. And I think we're going to be, bringing to the council a lot of different options and opportunities for housing, hopefully, that we'll be able to, really have a good strategy going forward. And I think we should do 51%, do it as a general tax, and then just, as the white paper comes out and as our strategy unfolds, that will come to the conclusions of, that we're going to make a policy of putting so much for housing, and it'll be a combination of a number of things to really get to where we need to be. So
I like that thought, and particularly if we can do it as a general tax, but also have some policies towards housing that help direct it to that. I know that Las Vegas has a resort tax or something. They do something that helps money go back to the community, and I applaud the efforts of Visit Napa Valley for for looking at this and looking at seriously at the housing issues. I mean, that's a critical issue, so I do applaud that. I do think that keeping control in St. Helena is pretty important. So I'd be leaning in that direction too.
Let me just make a couple of chronological comments here so that we all understand the dates, which is that, and this was from the meeting that Ms. Coverstein and I attended, attended so many meetings I can't even remember when it was, within the last week. Whatever we do, our ballot measure has to be to the registrar of voters by July 31st. That's a pretty fast time frame. Yeah, and then then that kicks off the impartial analysis would be due August 9th, arguments in favor August 16th, rebuttals August 23rd. Now let me having led the Measure D campaign. The Measure D campaign, that was the local sales tax, 1/2 point. It had no organized opposition. The businesses, to their great credit, rallied behind it here in St. Helena, and the taxpayer group that often is so vocal in the county did not oppose it. And that was, and we didn't need a 66.7% vote either. But my point is that with no opposition, it gathered less than 70% of the vote, which makes me skeptical that even though this tax would be imposed on visitors and not on residents effectively, I think it would be difficult to get a 66.7% vote. And that's compounded here by the confusing tax that we would be seeking, plus the tax that the county would also have on the same ballot. So I tend to agree that it needs to, that if we do it, it needs to be a general fund tax. I have no particular difficulty in terms of dedicating the tax to workforce housing. I think it would be a grave mistake to go back and say to ourselves we're going to take any portion of what we currently collect in TOT away from the budget and earmark it. But this is additional, and hopefully it can be, we can persuade our residents to support it based upon the fact that it would help us finance workforce housing. I also have to agree that 1% doesn't do much for us, 2% doesn't do a lot for us. But before I commit completely to that, we're obviously going to have another hearing with respect to it. And I think fairness suggests that we hear from our local lodging industry in terms of what it thinks if we go to 2% as opposed to 1%, and particularly whether the additional increment could impact the competitiveness of our local hotels, which I would not want to see. And while I certainly think I understand in general that most guests at luxury units, hotel rooms are not going to stop going over 1%. Nevertheless, there could be an impact in terms of groups and group purchases, trade shows, those that purchase any number of rooms in the off-season. And I'm worried about whether, if we're out of whack with the rest of the county, that could hurt us competitively. And so that's my caveat in terms of holding off for the moment as between 1% and 2%.
I think you have to keep in mind that the rest of everybody else around us may have gone up by 1%. And so we would only be 1% above everybody else.
Yeah, and my concern is that even if it's just 1%, that could impact our competitive position, particularly with group bookings. That's what bothers me. I'm not an industry expert. I don't know the answer to that.
The only thing I would add about that, Healdsburg recently did this. They increased their TOT rate 2%. It was a special tax. It did pass. And I went and looked at their ballot language, pro and con, and they projected how much additional TOT they would raise. And I took a look at their recent TOT report, and they did raise what they said they were going to raise, and their regular TOT kept going at the pace that they thought it was going to go, which sort of says to me it didn't have a negative impact on the hotel operators in Healdsburg. They were generating the revenues that everybody expected they would. It's not a point to dismiss, but on the other hand, this report here talks about how hotel rates are sort of on an upward trend generally. And I just feel if we're going to do it, we should go for 2%. We can't go for 1 and then come back 2 years later and say, give us another one. People are going to be kind of TOT weary by that point, I think.
No, I agree with that.
And so Healdsburg has language from recent...
Well, they actually did a special ballot measure, which is what the county and the other towns here are proposing to do. I have to say I'm not sure if American Canyon is in or out of this, but and they are looking at Healdsburg's language and, struggling with some issues, frankly, of how do you define workforce housing and how do you tell people exactly what this money is going to be spent on.
So that was a 66% that it passed on?
It just made it by like an eyelash.
But then, okay, and I see, then it creates the problems of definition of where that money is precisely.
Well, their ballot measure said what they were going to use it for. But that would be, if we were going to get into this county thing, that'd be one of the things we'd be working on with everybody else. Whereas if we do our own general fund thing, we just work with Tom and we work with Cindy on our own.
Right, and Healdsburg, I don't believe, was faced with a countywide TOT at the same time they were trying to pass it locally.
So they went up 2% while everybody else...
The other, well, as you think through the possibilities here, it worries me too that we could pass a 2% hypothetically TOT increase, and then the countywide one fails. I mean, that could happen. One thing that I guess I have a legal question, not for immediate answer, but if we pass a 2% TOT general fund. Once we pass it, are we legally obligated to implement it, or can we take a second look as a council, and if the county one fails, say, hey, we don't want to put ourselves in a position where we're not competitive? And you don't have to answer that tonight. These are sort of the...
I'll take a look at that. My understanding is that you could shape this with the flexibility to withdraw it, but I need to look at that.
Okay. I mean, that's...
Mr. Mayor, there's also another issue that I want to offer a few comments on, and that is related to general tax versus special tax. The current rule is 50% plus 1 for a general tax, where you don't allocate and specify what the money would be used for. That money would be used for general city, any municipal purpose. A special tax would dedicate that. That does have a requirement of 2/3 today. There's a ballot measure that the League of California Cities opposes, that's being backed by the American Beverage Association as well as the California Business Roundtable. And this measure would eliminate the current authority of cities to adopt general taxes with a majority vote. It would instead require a 2/3 vote. So the League and city attorneys are advising that any city that contemplates placing a measure on the November ballot think about that measure as a measure that would require a 2/3 threshold, because there's a probability that this particular measure passes, and it would impact, because it has a retroactivity clause in it, it would include any measure that has been adopted by municipalities since January 1, 2018.
We need 4 council votes to be safe.
And in addition to that, you would need 4 votes to put the measure on the ballot.
Can you bring us forward a resolution for our next meeting where we go on record opposing this thing?
We can add that as well.
I don't think that meets the 18-day limit. Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. No, this is actually for the general election, not June 5th. So.
Okay.
But All right. Well, should we schedule this for a further discussion at our next meeting? Is that what makes sense?
I think from a timing standpoint, you would need to adopt. You would have a second reading if we work backwards on July 24th or 6th, whatever that second meeting is in July. The first reading would need to occur by the second meeting in June. So you do have one meeting to look at some data, conversations with the lodging industry. We can bring you some additional framework and background on special versus general taxes, because there are some severe limitations on what the city can do. So if there was interest in a general tax, we cannot specify that the money would be used for housing, for example. It would have to be for any municipal purpose. Once it's in place, then you can make policy decisions on how you allocate those resources. But there are some strict limitations on the use of general tax revenues.
When you say can't specify, you're talking about in the ballot measure itself, or just here as a matter of policy?
Right, only in the ballot measure and the ordinance that governs that. Once you specify, then you're in the special tax arena.
Right, if it's in the ballot measure itself, that doesn't preclude us from passing a resolution saying this is what we intend to do, but another city council could change that.
There actually is a case that was decided many years ago in Santa Clara County where companion measures were placed on the ballot. The first one was a general tax. The second one, the companion measure, was placed on the ballot that said if the first measure passes, we intend to spend all the money in these specific ways. And that was obviously litigated and upheld as a general tax. Would I recommend that approach? No. I'm not sure that case would be decided the same way today.
There's already going to be too much TOT confusion on the ballot.
All right. I think we've done as much as we can do this evening. Thank you, everybody, very much. Thank you.